If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, President of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, the man behind emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com. You can find a copy, an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Also, all different kinds of searches on there, asset searches, locates, background reports, criminal records checks, adoption investigations. If you've been separated from your biological parent or son, daughter by the adoption process, we can reunite you. Online infidelity investigations. You think your spouse is cheating on you, you give us their email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, emailrevealer.com. Now, this show is brought to you by getthetea.com. Life Change Tea. I got to tell you something. I've been drinking this tea now for about 3 weeks, maybe a little bit over. And I've been doing the Daniel fast now for about 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, around that time. I got to go back and check. But I am feeling so good. We just went on a hike this morning, crack of dawn, and today, for the first time in all this time, I forgot to drink the tea, and I can definitely feel the difference. So I got the tea steeping on my stove right now as we speak. You got to let it steep for 8 hours. But Life Change Tea, if you want to lose weight, you want to feel better, you want more energy, my complexion, my skin's clearing up. All kinds of benefits from this wonderful life-changing tea that kind of detoxifies your body and makes you feel really good. Oh, boy, we got some kind of show today, man. We have Tony Bennett. Not the Tony Bennett, the singer. This is Tony Bennett, a solicitor. He's an attorney in the UK. And he's written this book, Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. Fascinating story that's really, really big over there in the UK and not that big over here because it involves some celebrities and stuff over there. Mr. Bennett, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you tell the audience, who is Tony Bennett?
Well, I'm 70 years old, so I'm retired now. Just a brief run through my career. I trained as a social worker after going to university, and I practiced in childcare and mental welfare work. I then graduated to doing what's called in England welfare rights advocacy, that is, advocacy on behalf of poorer off people, making sure they claimed all their entitlements. I then graduated, I qualified as an attorney and practiced as an attorney during the 1990s. I was then offered a very interesting political job working for the UK Independence Party, which was set up in the 1990s to campaign for Brexit, if you've heard the word.
Sure. We've heard
so I was in at the start 20 years ago. I recognised that this country needed to be independent. I joined the UK Independence Party working for its then we only had one member of the European Parliament, and he employed me as his political secretary. So I spent the next decade furiously campaigning to try and get us out of the European Union. And following that, I reached retirement age, but this case came across me for reasons which I'll explain, the Stuart Lubbock case. And since that case came across my desk, the last 12 years, most of my time has been spent on investigating cases of, broadly speaking, injustice and police corruption.
Oh, very good. So now, the book, you have a couple of titles for this book. Is this the one you want to promote, the Not Awight, Getting Away with a Murder?
Well, it's called Not Awight because the person where this terrible incident occurred, Michael Barrymore, had a catchphrase which was, all white now? In other words, all right now? It was a catchphrase he used on his very popular television programs. And so we borrowed that phrase and say, no, not Awight, because what he did and what he covered up was certainly not all right. And the subtitle of the book was Getting Away with Murder.
Well, give us an idea. Who was this Michael Barrymore? Because I haven't heard of him over here.
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I think the way I would put it is this, that he would be roughly comparable in celebrity status to your Oprah Winfrey over in America.
Really?
Now, Oprah Winfrey is a TV host and interviewer, whereas Michael Barrymore was more of a comic and entertainer. But if I tell you that his most popular TV program, Strike It Lucky, was viewed by up to 17 million people every night here. Now, we have a population of about 66 million in this country, so that is more than 1 in 4 watching his shows every night. Now, I think you've got about 300 million in your country, so it's a bit like 75 million over there watching a program. He was that famous. And somebody said he was an industry because at the time of the height of his powers, before this very tragic incident, he was employing possibly 200, 250 people, all to promote him. So he was really like a small-scale industry in his own right.
What about his wealth? Did he have the kind of wealth that Oprah Winfrey has? Because she's a billionaire.
No, I don't know. He never reached that kind of wealth. No, I think he spent a lot of money.
Okay.
No, he's rich enough to own 2 or 3 homes, and the place where this incident happened was what we call a mansion over here. It was a very palatial property, which would have cost at the time $2 or $3 million. So he wasn't short of money, but his income was huge.
Okay, so can you summarize the case for us and this whole Lubbock, Stuart Lubbock?
Yes, perhaps before we go, I should just go back to my personal life. I should have explained I'm married, 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and Michael Barrymore was also married, but sadly that marriage collapsed, and he became a homosexual. And that was, again, a major event in the life of the nation. If you can imagine Oprah Winfrey making some startling announcement, this is similar. And the fact that he was the most popular entertainer here and then became gay was huge news for ages. But anyway, to go to the incident then, the 2 main people involved were Michael Barrymore, who at the time was in his 50s, I believe, and a young man called Stuart Lubbock. Now, Harlow, where I was living at the time, is a working-class town, and he was an ordinary working man at the time of the incident, aged 33, and working in a meat-packing factory, a bacon factory it was actually. And again, quite an ordinary family. He had an older brother. Unfortunately, his parents were divorced, but he was a young lad who enjoyed a bit of partying and drinking, that kind of thing. Nothing out of the ordinary, steady job. And I suppose I ought to run on and explain then how the incident took place. Shall I go on to do that?
Well, I'm curious, because you co-wrote the book with Terry Lubbock. Is Terry Lubbock his father or brother?
Sorry, Terry Lubbock is Stuart's father.
Father. Okay, and Barrymore. How old is Barrymore?
Well, now he will be late 60s.
Oh, yeah, late 60s. So at the time he's about late 50s.
Yes, mid-50s, late 50s, yeah.
And you said that Lubbock was in his 30s.
33.
Now, Lubbock, was he openly homosexual, or is there questions?
No. There's no evidence or no insinuation that he was homosexual. None at all. In fact, he did marry, and unfortunately that didn't work out, and his wife left him, and they got divorced. But no, he was no evidence that he was gay at all. No.
Okay. All right, then describe the incident. What happened there?
Well, Michael Barrymore, just by way of background, he at the time of this incident, he was in an intense relationship with a gay lover called Jonathan Kenny, which is quite an important part of the story. And Jonathan Kenny is a drag queen in the northern part of England with a record of violence, and for some reason Michael Barrymore and he got together and were very much partners at the time of this incident. And on the night in question, this was a Friday night, Michael Barrymore and his lover set off for a nightclub in Harlow called the Millennium Nightclub. And so did Stuart Lubbock and his brother Kevin. So they didn't know each other beforehand, but they set off for this nightclub. And Stuart had 1 or 2 drinks, his brother had 1 or 2 drinks, and during the evening, Stuart Lubbock was introduced to Michael Barrymore, as were a number of people. If you can picture the scene, Michael Barrymore was in a corner of the nightclub, talking to some of his friends, 1 or 2 security people around, that kind of thing. And 1 or 2 other people came up and said hello, shook his hand, that kind of thing. Now, during the early hours of the morning, between about 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock, Michael Barrymore invited 4 people, I think, round to his flat. He invited 2 girls in their 20s, and he invited Stuart Lubbock. And he also invited another couple from Harlow called Kylie Merritt and Justin Merritt, and they become a very important part of the story. I'm pretty sure that Michael Barrymore knew the Merritts, the 2 Merritts, Justin Merritt and Kylie Merritt, brother and sister. So, by one circumstance or another, all of them found their way back in taxis to Michael Barrymore's house by about 3 o'clock in the morning. One other background I need to mention is that it's quite clear from various accounts that Michael Barrymore and his lover were on bad terms that evening and a furious row. I think that may have been a contributory factor.
Let me interrupt you for a second. I don't think the love,
of Michael Barrymore, yeah.
You mentioned that he had a violent past. Can you describe that?
He's got some kind of record of violence. I haven't got the details, but he has got a record of violent incidents up in the north of England. So that's really all we know. I don't know the details and the dates, but they were assaults, I believe.
And these were arrests. He was arrested for these assaults.
I believe he was, and I believe he was convicted, but I can't be 100% certain about that, so I don't want to be quoted on that.
Gotcha.
But it was part of his reputation, anyway.
Gotcha.
So what you've got at the party by now is you've got Michael Barrymore and 8 guests, 2 of whom he already knew, and then amongst those 8 people were 2 other gay people from the village who knocked on his door about 3 o'clock in the evening and asked if they could join the party as well. So Michael Barrymore, 6 people came along from the Millennium Nightclub, and then the 2 local gay lads in their 20s, they came along. So there was 8 people plus Michael Barrymore at the party.
And everyone was homosexual except for Stuart Lubbock.
And the 2 girls.
And the 2 girls, with 2 women as well.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the 2 young women came along, but you're quite right. You're absolutely right. All the males there were homosexual, yes.
Okay.
Apart from Stuart Lubbock, who wasn't, yeah. And perhaps I ought to add as part of the story that, and I'm sorry, some of the details are a little bit unpleasant to talk about, but we do know from the record that when Michael Barrymore got into his cab, this taxi to go back home, he said in a loud voice to the taxi driver, "I could do with a fuck." Made it quite clear that he was very much up for sexual activity. So that's on the record. That came out in the court case. But anyway...
Wait, Mr. Bennett, in the future, try and leave out the obscenities, because this will air on AM radio on the airwaves. So.
I didn't want to say it at all. I really didn't want to say it, but I mean, that is on the record. But
we can cut that one out,
I'll be careful.
Yeah,
of course
I'll
be careful, yeah. But anyway... What we knew when the case was reported in the papers the next morning was that we were told that a young man had been found drowning in Michael Barrymore's pool, and he was dead. Obviously, he was dead by the time he got to hospital. In fact, I can tell you he was dead well before that. In fact, he was dead before the ambulance was called. We could be quite certain about that. But the story that broke was that he had been swimming in this swimming pool and somehow got drowned. And that was the story that was put out at the time. And that story has stuck ever since. So whenever this case is in the news, which it has been on and off for years, and it's been in the news in the last year very much so for other reasons, it's always spoken of as the boy who died in the pool, or the boy who was found in the pool. And if I can come ahead to the main case I make in the book is, I am sure, on the basis of studying the case in depth, that he was never in that swimming pool. And really my investigations, which took a year or so at the time, really effectively proved that he was never in that swimming pool.
Yeah, looking up the case...
in other words, the idea that he drowned was a cover story hastily arranged to cover a brutal murder. And, I've not really... I'll come straight to this point as well. It's quite clear that he was brutally raped. We don't know by how many people, but the conclusions of the pathologist said were that he had been severely sexually assaulted, and that was a likely cause of death.
Well, what about, like, here in the States? We could take DNA samples. There would be semen. We'd be able to tell there was semen from multiple assaulters. You don't have that over there?
We have all of that. And this case was badly handled from the outset. And if I can move on to other matters we might come to, we have in England a system of being able to make a complaint to something called the Independent Complaints Commission, which investigates complaints against police officers. And when I got on the case many years later, it was quite plain, absolutely obvious that the police had done anything but a thorough job on the case. And the way that the case was handled by the police was really almost designed not to get to the evidence. The police immediately declared that this was a tragic accident. None of those things that you've mentioned were done, and several other things were not done either. I don't know if you want me to go into those now, but there were a number of things simply not done.
Oh, we're about to come to a break, so we can probably get to that when we get back. But now, when the police first arrived, and they immediately assumed it was an accidental drowning, he was swimming and he drowned, like, what was the temperature out there? Like, would it be likely that because it sounds it was April 1st, it had to be cool, the middle of the night had to be cold. Why did they, what was the temperature that night, do we know?
When the ambulance was called, Ed, it was about 5:45.
Yeah.
And the temperature at that time of night was 7 degrees centigrade, or as you would have it over there, I think 43 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty cold. The 1st of April, pretty cold night. I need to go back now, perhaps, and just give you a little bit of background about the swimming pool itself. The swimming pool was new, relatively new. Now, it had been closed for the entire winter. All right? So it hasn't been used September, October, November, December, January, February, March, never been opened, yeah? And it would have been virtually freezing cold, if you can imagine, the pool has had to survive the winter. And the argument of the people who covered this up and who killed Stuart Lubbock was that the pool had been opened up during the early morning, and that it had been heated up, and that Stuart Lubbock jumped in and had a whale of a time splashing around in this water. But here we come to one of the great mysteries of the case, because we had various stories about when the pool was opened, and I can be as certain as I can that the pool cover and the heating did not take place until after Stuart was found dead as a result of the sexual assault. So although Michael Barrymore insisted that he had opened the pool cover early, the only thing that makes sense of this whole case is that the pool cover was opened afterwards. And here we come to one of the major police mistakes in this case, and I would suggest it's a deliberate mistake. They allowed Michael Barrymore's manager to take the temperature of the pool. Right? Now, when this incident took place, Michael Barrymore's manager was called to the scene before the ambulance were called. Michael Barrymore's manager was called Michael Brown. And he arrived before the ambulance were called, before the police arrived, if you can understand that. And when the police arrived, incidentally, one element of the story is that before the ambulance came, Michael Barrymore did a runner down into the village to hide. That's another part of the story. But the police were not able to get there before the manager, Michael Brown. But when the police did arrive, they delegated Michael Barrymore's manager, Mike Brown, to take the pool temperature.
Using his equipment or the police equipment?
Yeah, using his equipment,
okay.
using a pool thermometer.
Okay.
That was by the pool, and so they allowed him, yes, to use their own equipment to take their own temperature. Now, the temperature of the pool was recorded as by Michael Barrymore's manager as 28.3 degrees centigrade, which is about 82 Fahrenheit, which would seem relatively normal for a swimming pool, but it almost certainly could never have got to that temperature from freezing. Within 2 or 3 hours, it's impossible for it to have risen to that temperature.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, we have to take a commercial break.
There's no way, evidentially, that the police should have allowed Michael Barrymore's manager to take the temperature.
Yeah, obviously not. That's an absolute crime scene contamination. We have to take a commercial break. We're with Anthony Bennett, Tony Bennett, not Tony Bennett the singer. This is Tony Bennett, the former retired solicitor in the UK. He's author of the book, Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. Story about Barrymore.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Get the Tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subhash Technosis by email at info@subhashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Anthony Bennett, Tony Bennett from the UK, former solicitor, author of the book Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. Now, before we left for the break there, you were saying that, how did you come to the conclusion that the pool was not uncovered?
Right. Can I, if you don't mind,
Sure.
let me get back to that, because we were on the point specifically of the police conduct, and I just wanted to sweep up matters regarding the police involvement.
Okay.
First of all, as we know, they handed over the all-important examination of the pool temperature to Michael Barrymore's manager, and I'm sure you would appreciate, and most of your listeners would understand, that that's completely contrary to normal police procedure, and one wouldn't place any reliance on the temperature he came up with. Secondly, the actual pool thermometer that was used was never recovered by the police. And that leads me on to a third point, which is almost unbelievable, that after the police had visited the scene and taken very short statements, they did not secure the scene, but they left Michael Barrymore's manager in charge of the scene of crime. It's almost unbelievable to think that could have happened, but I think you might be beginning to see that there might have been a pattern of a deliberate incompetence brought to this case. And in fact, later on, Ed, I did bring an action against the Essex Police to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and they did uphold several complaints about the police conduct there, so they were criticised. But to go back to your question, I think you were asking me to explain really what happened and why I think what has happened. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me then go back to what we know for certain about what took place that evening and what we don't know for certain. By the time we get to about 4 o'clock, all of the witnesses give a reasonably clear picture of what happened. And just to run through that, they arrived from about they were told music was put on, music on the record player, drinks were supplied. We also know that illegal drugs were supplied as well. That's admitted and on the record. Cocaine used. There was cannabis freely used that evening, which are both classed as Class A drugs in the United Kingdom. That is, they are at the top of the range and completely illegal to possess or supply them. And also, another drug used that evening was something called amyl nitrate, which is used to promote sexual excitement. That's one of its main purposes. We know that at about 3:30, three men went to a warm jacuzzi just outside on the patio. And we know that Jonathan Kenny was there, Michael Barrymore's lover, and Justin Merritt, and Stuart Lubbock. And those three went in the jacuzzi voluntarily. They were then fed with drinks by Kylie Merritt, the youngster. And they were apparently having a relaxing time in the jacuzzi. And that's where the witness evidence after that all goes to pieces. So if you can imagine, until that point of those three men being in the jacuzzi, everything seems to be quite normal. There's no contradictions between the witnesses. Everything seems perfectly normal.
And that's around 4 a.m.
That's 4 o'clock, roughly. Right. Now, we then come an hour and 3/4 later to 5:46 when the ambulance is called. And that period of time, 1 3/4 hours, is completely unaccounted for. The witnesses give a whole variety of contradictory stories, none of which really make any sense at all. And at 5:46, the ambulance was called, and again, if you can picture the scene, when the ambulance people arrived, they find Stuart Lubbock's body laid out on the side of the swimming pool, just with a pair of shorts on, and the witnesses say that they have just recovered him from the pool. So that's the scene we have at 5:46. So at 4 o'clock, we have the three men, one of them a homosexual, the other two probably not, enjoying themselves in the jacuzzi. 1 3/4 hours later, we have the ambulance called. Now, what one has to do is to work out what happened in that hour and 3/4. Now, what we do know from the pathology evidence, and I haven't gone into that in detail now, but altogether 5 pathologists were involved in this case, and all 5 agreed that he had suffered a serious sexual assault during that hour and 3/4. That's unanimous. Some of them said it must have been so serious that it killed him. And without being too graphic, all I can say is, not wishing to be too detailed, but the injuries to his anus were absolutely horrific. And I don't need to go into detail. They're really horrific.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? One is...
Yeah, of course, yeah.
What were they wearing? When they were in the jacuzzi, what were they wearing? They didn't bring bathing trunks with them.
Yeah, trunks. Michael Barrymore said that he provided them all with trunks and towels, swimming trunks.
Now, the distance between the jacuzzi and the pool, was it within eyesight?
Yes, they were close together, yeah.
Okay. And then you were saying that there was a coroner's inquest said that five pathologists said that the cause of death was due to this brutal anal rape.
Right. Okay. Well, if we move on to the pathology reports, we're moving on to a different subject. If I can just deal with the missing hour and 3/4, and then I'll gladly come on to the pathologist. But nobody could account for the missing hour and 3/4. Now, all the witnesses except the girls, I'm sure, must have known what happened to Stuart. All the other 7, but none of them claimed to know anything about it. They said they didn't know how these sexual injuries happened. If you can imagine it, none of those 7 had any idea. They all, at the inquest, said, no idea how it happened, couldn't have happened, and so on. And they invented this story of how Stuart Lubbock was swimming in the swimming pool. The only 2 witnesses who were reasonably honest were the 2 girls, who appeared to have been shunted away to a back room somewhere while the cover-up was going on, and they made very short statements saying that they weren't aware of anything that happened, although one of them did say that she was aware that she heard the men talking about a rape. So she told us that. Shall I go on to run through the pathology evidence? Because that's quite interesting, actually.
My next question was, what was the cause of death? Was it drowning or some kind of other trauma?
Right. This is one of the major reasons why I've been involved in the case again recently, because the inquest verdict was an open verdict. I don't know if you have such a verdict over in America, but an open verdict is essentially a way of the coroner saying that she can't say what the cause of death was. An open verdict tells you nothing, really, nothing at all.
Yeah, we do have this, like inconclusive. We would have the same thing.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, inconclusive then. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why an open verdict was given by the coroner was really because the whole case was muddied by the claim that he'd been in the swimming pool. So all the pathologists were told as a fact, Ed, that he had been in the swimming pool that night. So they presented that as an absolute 100% fact, when I'm sure that it wasn't. And in fact, if we were to go through the pathologist's report in detail, most of them are very, very clear in saying that the actual autopsy results were not consistent with drowning. And if I can develop that a little bit further, one of the crucial evidences was a pattern of what are called petechiae on the face and neck of Stuart Lubbock. Now, petechiae are tiny little blood spots which appear around the face and neck in particular when somebody is asphyxiated, suffocated. So, again, if you can imagine the scene, the doctors are told as a fact that he's been in the swimming pool, so they start off assuming that he's been drowned, but then a couple of the pathologists note these petechiae, which were very clear. And again, if you go to all the textbooks, which I've had a chance to look at, they will tell you that petechiae are a classic sign of asphyxiation. Now, 2 of the pathologists said that they thought that asphyxiation was the cause of death or a major cause of death. Then you had another pathologist who said that another 2 pathologists who said that the rape was so severe that could have killed him alone. The severity of it could have triggered a heart attack and killed him. Other doctors said it could be a combination of asphyxia and a heart attack. Only the original pathologist gave a verdict of drowning, and that's quite interesting as well, because the original pathologist was somebody called Dr. Michael John Heath, Now, he was a Home Office pathologist, a registered Home Office pathologist, which means one of the top pathologists authorised by the Home Office. And it's always been a mystery to us why he was called into this particular death. And I think you'll find that Home Office pathologists are called in where controversial deaths are involved or celebrities, that kind of thing. But, when I first took this case over in January 2006, the very first thing I did was after I looked at the files, was to try and bring a private prosecution against Michael Barrymore for various offences committed at the party, mainly drugs offences.
Well, before we get to the private prosecution, which is a whole interesting, because we don't have that here. We have civil litigation. We don't have private criminal prosecution.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that. But we're going to have a commercial break coming up. Now, but before we get to that, were there any indications of trauma to his neck or his nose, signs of ligatures around his neck or his mouth, anything like that?
No, actually. I can't recall any bruises or attack wounds or anything like that. No, there was a toxicology report which said that he had consumed a certain amount of alcohol and a small amount of drugs as well. But there were no significant signs of him being held or gripped, as far as I can remember. Nothing major, anyway. Nothing major. So the pathology signs were a serious sexual assault, his anus in ruins, really, in bits, terrible. And the fact that he'd been asphyxiated, those are the two things that we know. But he was also found with water in his lungs and in his body, which required explanation. So that was another feature. Again, the pathologists, despite finding water in the body, again, largely ruled out drowning as a cause of death. So the problem for the coroner in charge of the inquest was, with all these different opinions, you could argue that she had very little choice but to say an open verdict, because she couldn't say which one of them was the actual cause of death. Was it the asphyxia, or was it the rape?
Now, the anal trauma, did they come to a conclusion whether this was by use of a device or an instrument, or was this...
Yes, I can help you on that, definitely. A couple of the pathologists were experts, and they said that it must have been either a fist or an object as large as a fist.
Gotcha.
And again, I'm sorry this is a little bit graphic, but I've got to say it, I think, that the post-mortem, the aperture of his anus was described as big as an orange.
Oh, my God. Okay, well, that's no drowning. Yeah, that's no drowning for sure. Okay, we're with Anthony Bennett. He's the author of the book, Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering...
And now a word from our sponsors.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap! I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So... I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Oh, sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Sean Duff from strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Tony Bennett, author of the book Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. It's a story about Michael Barrymore and his pool. Now, Mr. Bennett, you were talking about how over there in the UK you have something called a private prosecution. Describe what that is.
Right. Michael Barrymore undoubtedly committed criminal acts that evening, mainly drugs offences. But he wasn't prosecuted for them. Now, we have a system in England where anybody can bring a private prosecution if they want to. If they think they've got evidence of a crime and the police does nothing about it, you can bring a private prosecution. And that really is what triggered the massive publicity in the case, because I did bring this private prosecution in January, and it was as of the publicity of that the whole case took off in a big way. I should say, by the way, that the judge in the case refused for various reasons to go ahead with the prosecution. He did allow it to proceed to a trial. It didn't need to bring it there, so he allowed it to proceed. But one feature of the case is that Michael Barrymore repeatedly over his whole career found with drugs in hotels everywhere. I think only once was he ever prosecuted. So I think perhaps what we can get here is a little bit of how celebrities are protected from some of the crimes that they committed, an aura of protection around some of them, where let's be honest, Michael Barrymore had many friends among police, and in fact, one of his lovers was a police officer. So, this perhaps, for one reason or another, makes the police reluctant to prosecute. But I felt that he should be prosecuted. But that was how the case began. Stuart Lubbock's father lived in the same town as me in Harlow. That was my interest in the case. And when I heard about another event in the case, I just offered help. And by the way, the event that triggered this was that Michael Barrymore was on a program, a reality TV show called Celebrity Big Brother. I don't know if you're aware of that over in the States. But
no, we have that here too. We have it here too.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's a show where there's a Big Brother show, but there's also Celebrity Big Brother, where celebrities get together and live in a house for a week. And that was the attempt to revive Michael Barrymore's career. This incident about Stuart Lubbock happened in 2001. This attempt to revive Michael Barrymore's career was in early 2006, and it was that event that prompted Stuart Lubbock's father to contact me and ask for help, because he just couldn't stand the idea that this man, who was responsible for something terrible happening in his house, his career was going to be revived. And I'm pleased to say that as a result of my investigations, he was arrested. I wrote my book, and as a result of that, his career never took off the ground again. So I regard that as a feather in my cap. He didn't deserve to have his career revived, and it was really ruined by the year I spent on the case and writing the book.
Well, let me ask you some questions about this private prosecution, because I'm fascinated.
Sure,
Now, a couple of things. Now, have you ever done this before in another case?
No, I haven't, no. It's the first time.
All right, now...
go on.
And you actually act as the prosecutor? Like, you conduct your own investigation and you cross-examine witnesses? And
Yes. No, right. The way it goes about, any person in Britain is entitled to inform a magistrate that an offence has been committed. And if the police haven't prosecuted it, you can bring your own prosecution. All I had to do was set out in a legal letter the particulars. So all you have to do is you have to set out the name of the defendant, where he lives, what the offences are, what are the facts of the case. I mean, he was found with drugs in the property, so he was and supplying to others, so there were clearly offences there.
Right.
And the next procedure is that the magistrate looks at the case and decides whether it can go forward. And in this case, it didn't go forward. But there are cases of private prosecutions that do succeed in this country. In fact, one of the most, well, there are two very famous ones. One was the a private prosecution taken out by the parents of somebody called Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in a racist murder in London in the 1980s, I think. And the police didn't act for one reason or another, and the parents took the case to court. There was a similar case in Ireland, Northern Ireland, where, again, the authorities did not prosecute the perpetrators of the Omagh bombing, which killed 30 people, again, sometime in the 1980s, I think. And because the authorities didn't act, some of the victims of the families of the victims got together, raised money with the help of some of the newspapers in this country, and they successfully brought a private prosecution. So yes, they do happen, but they're rare.
We do have a similar process here where a civilian can file a complaint, make their own affidavit and complaint, and just submit it directly to the prosecutor's office if the police aren't cooperating with them. And I've recommended that in the past. Now, why did Stuart Lubbock's father contact you? How did he know about you?
Right, I lived in the same town as him, in Harlow in Essex, and actually, funnily enough, because I lived in the same town, I'd followed this case for years anyway. Every time it was national publicity, it was the top story in the local newspaper. And quite simply, when I think it was the 1st of January that year, there was a big splash in the local paper saying that the father, Terry Lubbock, was very angry that Michael Barrymore was having his career revived on this programme. So all I did simply was I wrote him a letter and said, look, I've been a solicitor for a number of years. I followed the case. Do you want any help with it? As simple as that. And he phoned me up and said, look, yes, I want justice for my son. And so I spent the next 18 months very much immersed in this case and trying to get results for him.
And it was you and Terry who wrote this book together?
We did, yeah. We wrote it while all this was going on. We wrote most of the book before Michael Barrymore was arrested, because shortly before the book was published, it was serialized in one of the national newspapers over here, and which attracted a great deal of attention. And following the publication of the serialization in the News of the World, the police arrested Michael Barrymore on suspicion of murder, arrested Jonathan Kenny on suspicion of murder, and arrested Justin Merritt on suspicion of murder. And they spent 36 hours under questioning by the police, but sadly the police announced at the end that they had insufficient evidence with which to charge anybody. Simply because, Ed, of course, nobody would admit to anything. It was complete. Actually, funnily enough, at the inquest, the coroner described the witnesses as coming at like a wall of silence. That was a phrase that the coroner used very often, a wall of silence. The witnesses, you tried to ask them about what happened between 4:30 and 5:45 that evening, a wall of silence. They didn't know, they had no idea what happened. And so the coroner was stuck with people who just wouldn't tell the truth, of course.
Let me ask you real quick. We're coming to the end of the hour. Do you think there's enough content to continue on beyond an hour, or do you want to sum it up in the next 6 minutes?
Well, we can continue a bit longer, really, depending on some of the things that we haven't covered. For example, I would like to explain to the listeners the contradictions about how Stuart was found in the pool, because that was a crucial part of my investigations. They all came up with very different stories, and I would like to perhaps tell your listeners about those details, because they really prove that they were all lying.
Absolutely. Then take your time with that. Go ahead.
But before I do that, I will come back to that. But we left one point, which was about the first pathologist on the scene, which I wanted to follow up, because I was explaining that the first pathologist on the scene was a high-ranking pathologist called in by the Home Office. Now, his name was Dr. Michael John Heath. Now, the strange thing is on the very day after I brought my private prosecution and it was publicised, I think it was the 10th of January, on the very next day, Dr. Michael John Heath resigned as a Home Office pathologist. And what I can tell you is that his resignation triggered a whole spate of inquiries into his pathology reports. He'd probably done more pathology reports in this country than anybody else, but many of them turned out to be very inadequate and very misleading. And in fact, I'm not sure how many cases have been reworked, redecided on the grounds that the court has had to throw out his evidence, but there was many, certainly a couple of dozen at least, cases that had to be reviewed because it was discovered that he'd given completely incompetent evidence. And the point in this case is that at the very beginning of this case, he told the police that the main cause of death was drowning. So all the papers, all the newspapers, all the television said right at the beginning, in the very first few days, the pathologist says Stuart Lubbock drowned in the swimming pool. And if the coroner had not called in a second pathologist, that would have stood, probably, that verdict. But the other pathologists, there were 4 others, all major pathologists in this country, and they all basically said this is not a case of drowning. He died from other causes. So you have to raise a question mark. First of all, why was Dr. Heath called into this celebrity death of somebody at several celebrities' house? Then you'd have to ask why he gave such bad opinions in so many other cases, and then you'd have to ask why he resigned the very day after I began this prosecution. And incidentally, the competence of his post-mortem was bitterly criticised by the other pathologists, that he hadn't done this, he hadn't done that, he hadn't taken measurements, he'd failed to do this, he'd failed to weigh that. And so it was a very, very lackadaisical post-mortem.
I can imagine there was a lot of panic at the scene, with Barrymore panicking, his buddies panicking, and then they get their buddy pathologist comes in there through some connection, maybe through the manager, and a lot of shortcuts were taken. Yeah. After I'd written this book, I was contacted by somebody who runs a
a solicitor, actually, who runs something called Inquest, which is a legal advice service for people who are going through inquests. And she told me horrendous stories of how corrupt pathologists exist in Britain and corrupt high-profile investigations. So if some people, some celebrities or high-profile people have committed an act which results in serious injury or death to somebody, it can be manipulated by corrupt pathologists. This is a fact we have to recognise. Just like in any walk of life, the police can be corrupt, celebrities can be corrupt, anybody can be corrupt. So can pathologists, and I think this may have been the case here, that he was directed to call this as a drowning.
Yeah, we have that here in the States too. It seems to be like a funnel point, where if you got your right guy in there, he can cover up a lot of stuff for you. Like that they had that in Arkansas when Bill Clinton was.
Well, I'm familiar with Clinton and Arkansas. I've studied that. Yes, I know.
All right, let's take a commercial break though.
But okay, so here you've got a possibly corrupt pathologist.
Right.
And then you've got a possibly corrupt senior police officer who tells his men, allow the manager to take the temperature of the pool, don't seize the thermometer, and allow the manager to run the crime scene after we've left. If you put all that together, how was Stuart Lubbock expected to get justice? All the damage was done in the first 48 hours, what we call over here the golden hours. The golden hours are the 48 hours after an event when you need to seize all the evidence you possibly can, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we actually have, in the States, we have a TV show called 48 Hours. It's a reality documentary TV show that shows the first 48 hours of a murder investigation. We have to take a commercial break, though, right now. With Anthony Bennett. Fascinating content here about this story about the poor Stuart Lubbock, and it's really a shame too, because when I was looking up this case, so often they just described him as the man in the pool. He was Stuart Lubbock. He had a father, Terry Lubbock. He had a brother, Kevin. People that loved him, and died way too young, way too soon. A brutal abuse before his death. Even if we throw all the evidence out, he did drown. A brutal abuse before his death, physical injuries to his anus. There's no doubt about that. So we'll be right back with more of Anthony Bennett, not Awight, getting away with murder.
And now a word from our sponsors.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap! I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry, I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Sean Duff from strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Don't forget the show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Greatest tea on earth. We're talking about the death of Stuart Lubbock at the swimming pool of Michael Barrymore, a big celebrity over there in England, and was on Celebrity Big Brother there for a while. Mr. Bennett, you had mentioned in passing earlier that in between the 4 a.m. and the period of time that they called the police or the police arrived, that Michael Barrymore tried to run into town or something like that?
He ran into town around about the same time as the ambulance was called. Yeah, he ran down to a friend of his in the village, and he explained this as panic. But in the end, his manager had to call him on the mobile phone. The police said, "We need to talk to him." In fact, funnily enough, the ethics police were very reluctant to name anybody in this. Obviously, the press got onto this fairly early on, and the police were desperate to talk to Michael Barrymore because he's the owner of the house, and they couldn't find him. And eventually, his manager had to ring him up and say, "Look, you'll have to talk to the police. They want to, what your explanation." I think it took them about 2 hours before they could get to him. But Eddie, if you wouldn't mind, I would just like to mention one other thing that I forgot earlier, evidentially, about the swimming pool.
Well, yeah, but real quick first, he actually ran on foot, or he got into his car?
Yeah, on foot. He was seen by a witness to collect. He was seen by a witness to collect certain items, wrap them in a towel or a jumper, and then run off. So he was seen going into drawers here and there, picking things up, putting them in a jumper or a bag or a towel or something like that, and then running off. Yes,
So literally running from the scene of a crime. Running from the scene of a crime.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What were you saying? You were going to say that I interrupted you?
Anyway, I was trying to get over the incompetence of the police.
Right.
And one thing very important that I forgot to mention, sorry I didn't mention it before, but the police did not do a diatom test on the swimming pool. Now, I don't know much about diatoms, but they are some kind of small bacteria or something similar which floats about in swimming pools. Now, if a diatom test had been done, the police would have had proof either way as to whether anybody had been in that swimming pool or not.
Really?
Please don't ask me how the test works, but if they had done a diatom test, I'm absolutely sure that they would have found that had been no human being in that pool. And if I can just explain why Stuart was found by the side of the pool and why water was found in his system.
Okay.
I think it's quite simple. Clearly, the man had been severely sexually assaulted and died as a result of that. There can't be much doubt about that. Or asphyxiation associated with that. Now, it's the simplest thing in the world for 3 or 4 people to haul his body out onto the swimming pool, isn't it? Easily done, yeah?
Sure.
But dress him up in a pair of shorts, pour a bucket of water over him, stuffed some water down his throat so that water appears to be in his lungs. I'm absolutely certain that that is what is done. He wasn't actually found by the ambulance in the pool. They found him laid out on the side of the pool. And what I'd like to do now, in response to your question, is can I please take you through all the different versions of what happened when the witnesses say they found Stuart Lubbock in the pool, because that is really the core of the case, I think.
Oh, that would be excellent, yeah.
Right, so let me go first of all to what Michael Barrymore said. These are very important, these statements, because they show the scale of the deception. So Michael Barrymore, in his very first statement, said this: I decided to go for a stroll early in the morning by the swimming pool at about 5:30 in the morning, and I saw Stuart floating. I rushed in and told Jonathan Kenny, that's his lover, and the others to come and help. Now then, one thing you'll notice there is he doesn't mention anybody else being with him at the time. Now he then says he saw his lover Jonathan Kenny pull Stuart out of the pool. So this is his first statement. I was alone, I saw Stuart floating, I called my lover Jonathan Kenny, and Jonathan Kenny pulled Stuart out of the pool. Now then, in his next statement, Barrymore says that he saw Stuart floating at the bottom of the pool. The pool was 6 feet deep at least, all right? 6-7 feet deep. So I don't know if you've ever heard of anybody floating at the bottom of a pool, but that was the exact term he used, floating at the... So if I go on, he gave an interview, and he wrote a book, in fact, on the case. He wrote a book about this case, in fact.
Wow.
Or about his life, including the death of Stuart Lubbock. And he said that he said that when he first saw Stuart, he stared into his eyes for several minutes until he realised what had gone on. Now, how could he stare into Stuart Lubbock's eyes when if he was 6 feet at the bottom of the pool? It's not possible, is it? In fact, when I spoke to the detective chief inspector in the case, he said, yes, I noticed that it must have been pretty difficult to stare into Stuart's eyes if he really was under 6 feet of water. So that's Michael Barrymore's stories, which, as you can see, changed. But let's have a look at some of the other ones. Now, I come now to Simon Shaw, who was one of the two local homosexuals. And he gives two separate accounts, so bear with me while I go through the first account. In his first statement, Simon Shaw said that he just happened to notice Stuart's body in the swimming pool. On his own, as he mistakenly left the party early by a side door because he didn't know the property. He said that he got him out of the swimming pool all on his own and then went home.
Oh, brother.
Now, one of the things that emerged in evidence later was that he'd been to the Barrymore's house many times before. He knew the property inside out. So the whole story was absolute nonsense. But can you see instantly how the story is just unbelievable from start to finish? He didn't know the property. That's a lie. He got him out of the pool all on his own. Now, I defy anybody to get anybody who's unconscious or dead out of a pool on their own. It's barely humanly possible. And if you did, by the way, if that really had happened, you'd have abrasions of all kinds on the man's body as he scraped the side of the swimming pool. So I think probably your listeners will be getting an idea that none of these stories make any sense. Let me go now into his second statement. 2 or 3 days later, he made a second statement. This time he says this: Barrymore, myself, and my friend James Futters were all smoking cannabis when Michael Barrymore said, let's go for a swim. He then says that he and James Futters found Stuart and that Michael Barrymore was not there when they found him. He then says that he alone dived in and pulled Stuart from the pool, but he then says somebody else helped to pull him out. So I don't know whether I need to run through all the different stages of how these are inconsistent, but I'll just pass over them and you can ask me questions about it. But his second version is different from the first. It contradicts Barrymore, who said that he was the first to find him. He contradicts himself now by saying that somebody else was with him. And so let me go on to James Futter's version. James Futters is the local gay man who was a friend of Simon Shaw and a friend of Michael Barrymore. His account is more or less the same as Simon Shaw's, but he also says that Michael Barrymore was not with them when he and his friend found Stuart. So they're contradicting Michael Barrymore's version of events. Now I come finally to the version of Jonathan Kenny, Michael Barrymore's lover. Now his account is like this. He says, all of a sudden, Michael Barrymore rushed in to where I and Justin Merritt were sitting, and Barrymore shouted, "Someone is drowning." But he says that this was only minutes after they'd left Stuart Lubbock in the jacuzzi, and that he was just toweling off after being in the jacuzzi. You'll remember that he was in the jacuzzi at 4 o'clock. But all this is happening at 5:45, so he's claiming that he was just toweling off after being in the jacuzzi for a couple of hours. This is not credible. But now he says further that he was the first to find Stuart, or to see Stuart, because Michael Barrymore had rushed away from the pool, and he says, went to the pool, and he saw Stuart floating at the top of the pool with his face downwards. So if you get the picture here, his account is Barrymore rushes down, says, "I've seen someone in the pool." Jonathan Kenny goes and has a proper look and sees him floating face down. And he then says that Kylie Merritt helped to get Stuart out of the swimming pool. Nothing about Simon Shaw, nothing about James Futters. Jonathan Kenny says that he was the one who got Stuart Lubbock out of the pool, helped by Kylie Merritt. So complete contradictions.
You know, it's interesting, too, that they almost all claim that they were the only person there, and they're the ones who found him. They're the ones. That's a huge contradiction. You know?
I mean, they are massive, aren't they? They're massive. Now, I should just I won't go into them, and there are other details, but I will just add that Kylie Merritt, when she was questioned, completely denied that she'd help get anybody out of the swimming pool. Now, I think the thing that I'd like to get over to your listeners, that this is the core of it really is, can you tell me how a police force and a coroner can come up with an open verdict after these people have clearly all lied through their teeth? I'm sorry to say it, and I don't mind saying it because it's so obvious that they've all fabricated their stories. But how is it possible that these people who've fabricated the stories have got away with it? Why have they not at least been prosecuted for perjury or interfering with the course of justice, as we call it, perverting the course of justice? They've obviously lied. It's obvious that they're all covering up for a terrible sexual assault, and yet all we have is an open verdict and no prosecutions at all.
Now, what about since that time? It's been a long time. 2001, I think it was, right?
Yes. Well, Ed, along the way, I mean, in the wake of the arrests, the three men, as I've said, were arrested: Barrymore and Kenny and Merritt, all arrested, and then discharged after about 36 hours. And the police said that they didn't have sufficient evidence to prosecute them. Now, just one or two little things along the way there. The book was published and went very well. I also managed to successfully get the Independent Police Complaints Commission to criticise Essex Police very severely for their failures during the 48-hour period, the golden period. I also was able to make a claim for compensation on what we call criminal injuries compensation. Now, we have a scheme in England whereby If you can prove on the balance of probabilities that somebody has died from a crime of violence, then the parents are entitled to compensation automatically from the state. In other words, if it's more likely than not that somebody has died from a crime of violence, the parents will get compensation. In this case, the mother and the father were entitled to about £6,800 each. But the point is that had never been done before. Nobody had thought to make this claim, and it simply involved giving the Criminal Injuries Authority the same information that I've given you in this phone call. The contradictory evidence, the pathology evidence, and of course they said, yes, he suffered from a crime of violence, and they paid him the compensation. Now, that was some small comfort, if you can imagine, to the parents. They'd got some kind of result, not the result they wanted, but they got some satisfaction and a small amount of financial compensation. But Ed, I'd completely forgotten about the case until about 2 years ago. I'd done what I could back in 2006, 2007. There was no more to do. But unbelievably, 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago...
Well, you know what? This might be a good time to take a break, and we'll get back to this about what happened 2 years ago. You'd forgotten about the case, and 2 years ago. So we'll be right back with more of Tony Bennett. His book is Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. A fascinating topic.
And now a word from our sponsors.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What about your crap? I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Sean Duff from strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Tony Bennett, former solicitor in England over there. Wrote a book, Not Awight, Getting Away with Murder, Uncovering How Stuart Lubbock Was Killed. Now, Tony, when we left off, you were saying how you'd forgotten about the case for 2 years, and then somehow you got dragged back in.
Yes, I'm going to tell you about how I got dragged back in a moment. I've just realised a couple of things which I think just to give further information to your listeners, okay. If you don't mind, just before we do that.
Sure.
First of all, I did mention the first pathologist and the gravity of his failures. Just read out a list of them here, which from the official record, that Heath, 1, failed to make any note whatsoever of the length or depth of the lacerations in Stuart's anus. Secondly, failed to make any description at all of the damage to the anal canal. Thirdly, failed to make a histological examination of the lungs, which is normal pathology practice. The fourth one I've already mentioned, failed to call for a sample of water from the swimming pool, which would have provided evidence of diatoms in the pool. And fifth, failed to even mention the obvious petechiae, the pinhead-sized blood spots, which all the other pathologists had pointed to. So that was the other pathologists attacking Dr. Heath. Now, I would, again, you asked me about the whether there was any evidence by the pathologist of a hard object being inserted into the anus. I would like to just run through the report of Professor Crane, these essential bits. He says, first of all, a possible cause of death is asphyxia, that is, mechanical interference with breathing, such as obstructing the mouth and the nose. He said also, I note that Dr. Heath's autopsy revealed the presence of significant injuries to the anus. The anus was dilated, its margin was bruised, there were lacerations at 6 o'clock and at 12 o'clock. There was no depth or length of the lacerations given. It is quite clear from the post-mortem photographs that there continued to be significant bleeding from the anal lacerations, even in the mortuary. These injuries, continued Professor Crane, were indicative of a serious sexual assault. They were caused by the forceful insertion of a hard object into the anus. They could not have been caused by consensual anal intercourse, and would be in keeping with the insertion of a large object or by the practice of fisting, whereby a clenched fist is forced into the anus. And it goes on, if Lubbock was conscious whilst this was taking place, he would have experienced severe pain and is likely to have had to been forcibly restrained. It also seems highly likely that he would have been screaming or crying out in pain. Bleeding would have occurred immediately after the event and would have been a significant amount. Now, one thing I did fail to mention also was that several neighbours heard screaming at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And they weren't called to give evidence at the inquest, but that would be consistent with Stuart having been violently assaulted about 5 o'clock in the morning, about 3/4 of an hour before the ambulance was called. But anyway, shall I go on to just to explain what's happened recently? Because I got a call from Terry Lubbock just about 18 months ago now, 21 months ago, because he saw a newspaper report that Michael Barrymore was suing Essex Police for damages. Now, the basis of that was that he claimed that Essex Police had no evidence whatsoever for having arrested him on suspicion of murder. And furthermore, they said that the arrest was unlawful because he'd been arrested by a detective inspector and not a detective detective chief inspector. The rules are that where there is a murder, a suspect arrested for murder, he has to be arrested by somebody of the rank of detective chief inspector or above. Unfortunately, because the police had to arrest 3 men at the same time, the same day, they couldn't find a detective chief inspector at short notice to arrest Barrymore, so they sent a detective inspector 1 rank below. So that was part of his case, the wrong rank of the officer who arrested him, but also he said there was no evidence to justify his arrest on suspicion of murder. The amount of damages he was claiming was £2.5 million, which I think is about $3.5 to $4 million in dollars. Now, you can imagine what effect that had on Stuart's father. Here he is, his son hasn't got justice, the perpetrators have not been brought to justice, and there is either the perpetrators or somebody with good knowledge of what happened going to the courts and trying to claim £2.5 million. It stinks, really, doesn't it?
It's horrific that he would have the gall to even attempt that, or that he would have an attorney who would go along with that.
I agree. I agree. The gall is the right word. So many people have said that. They could not believe he had the gall to do it. Exactly those words, yeah.
Now, it's been so long. Are there any rumors or gossips? Because so many people were involved. There were so many people there of what happened that night?
No, there isn't. The nearest I can get to it is that when these proceedings opened, by the way, Terry Lubbock, the father, is not a party to these proceedings. Michael Barrymore is suing Essex Police, so Terry Lubbock can't interfere in those proceedings. It's a matter for the courts, for Michael Barrymore, and for Essex Police. It's not for Terry Lubbock. But what we do is we did try to obtain a second inquest on the basis of fresh evidence. But Michael Barrymore's case was essentially founded on that there was insufficient evidence to arrest him on suspicion of murder, and the case has gone through the courts now. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that the judge in the case a few months ago decided that Michael Barrymore had proved his case that there was insufficient evidence to arrest him on the charge of murder. And the court ruled that he would be going to get a compensation which is yet to be fixed by others. So where we are now is he's claimed £2.5 million. The court agreed to entitle some compensation. I believe at the moment Michael Barrymore is struggling with the amount of compensation, and if they can't agree, the court the court will make. But I tell you what, justice turned on its head. Really, it's one injustice after another, and I must admit, the judge may have had grounds for his because there is no direct proof that Michael Barrymore participated in this attack. I should make that clear. We don't know who committed this attack on Stuart Lubbock. We do not know who it is. We can make intelligent guesses, but we don't know. And that is the trouble here, that with the wall of science, you can't penetrate the wall of science. But I will tell you that was an intelligence report supplied by somebody to the Essex Police Intelligence Service. An informer stated that he had evidence that 2 of the witnesses had been paid off a substantial sum of money to lie about what happened that night. 2 of the witnesses had been paid off a substantial sum of money. Now, we can make intelligent guesses about who those 2 witnesses are. I think it might be the 2 girls, personally, but there's no evidence as to who they are. But that would be utterly consistent with what I believe has happened in this case. There's been an almighty cover-up. Not only that, but I believe that account to be true, that witnesses were paid off large sums of money to say nothing.
because we saw the witness's lifestyle change in employment,
I don't know. I think for obvious reasons, the intelligence report has never been published in full. You wouldn't expect that, really, to be honest. I mean, there would be an intelligence file at Essex Police, who the informant was, and what his source of knowledge was, what his reasons were. I mean, who knows whether he might have known that for a fact, or he might have just made a guess. But it doesn't appear to have got anywhere. I mean, you would look, sure, for witnesses' lifestyles to have changed, new cars, holidays, that kind of thing. But
right.
all we know for certain, Ed, is that one informant has said that two witnesses were handsomely paid off, which, to my mind, is very consistent with what we know about the scale of this cover-up.
Oh, boy. In all of our discussion today, is there anything I've left out that I've forgotten to ask you?
I think we've covered the main grounds, honestly. I mean, there are matters of details that we could delve into, but hopefully your listeners will have an idea of what happened. We know, I mean, to summarise then, Ed, we know that it was a serious sexual assault that took place. There's no doubt about that, very serious. We can deduce, I think, that was the cause of death, even though the coroner wouldn't agree. We can deduce from the witness statements that I've read out about how he was supposedly found in the pool, that he wasn't found in the pool, and that he probably was never in the pool, and that basically this is a fake drowning, a hoax, rapidly concocted on the spot by the people who killed him, and obviously wanted to cover up. And then, as you say, we have a saying in English, I don't know if you have the same over there, adding insult to injury.
Yeah, we do.
And surely the compensation being paid to Michael Barrymore after this is a true example of adding insult to injury. But I think I've covered the main points.
One last question. Now, in the media, like the average guy on the street, do they believe the official story, or do they believe that this is all a cover-up? No,
if you look at the internet, Twitter, and so on, there's many jokes made about Michael Barrymore. Most people know that Stuart was in effect raped that evening, and cruelly raped. I mean, I think everybody knows that. It's one of these things that everybody knows, really. But of course, there is still the media representing this as a drowning. Actually, on the back cover of my book, when I first started making noises about this case, there's a newspaper called The Sun over here, which was very close to Michael Barrymore. And at the beginning of the year, they wrote a headline like this: Michael Barrymore's story has been backed by medical evidence and key witnesses. Now, The Sun has unearthed lost evidence that seems to back up Michael Barrymore's version of events. Now, Michael Barrymore actually claimed that the injuries to Stuart's anus were caused by a hospital thermometer when he arrived in the ambulance. And in fact, there was a separate investigation, quite a costly investigation into those claims. He and his lawyers and his publicist said that if there was any injury to his anus, it must have happened. They blamed the hospital. So the hospital had to be investigated to see if there was any truth in it. Of course, the thermometer was a tiny little thin one that would have done no damage at all. But again, coming back to the point I was making, this same newspaper, The Sun, which had backed Michael Barrymore to the hilt and backed up his so-called medical evidence, 1 year later, they ran an opinion poll, Ed, on this issue, and this is what they said. Readers of our newspaper say they don't want the disgraced entertainer back on television. Memories of that ghastly night of death and debauchery at his home are still too fresh. Once, Barrymore was a genuinely great talent. Today, he is a pathetic and disgraced liability.
So this did destroy his career. After this incident, he went under.
It's remained under. Yeah, right. He's never got back. No.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Now, how can people? If people want to find you and follow your work, do you have a website or a Twitter or Facebook or anything?
I don't have a website. I am on Twitter. I can be contacted on Twitter, and my handle is Zampos, ZAMPOS.
VAMPOS?
No, ZAMPOS, Zampos.
ZAM.
No, Z for zebra.
Oh, ZAM. PO?
Yeah, ZAMPOS.
POS. ZAMPOS. Okay, Anthony Bennett, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I don't enjoy the story, but I enjoy the way you tell the story, and I appreciate that. I hope people check out your book. If anything new comes up, get a hold of me, okay? And we'll update the audience.
There are developments, and I will certainly, I've got your email now, Ed. I'll be pleased to update you. I think it will cause a minor sensation if he gets any money at all, so happy to talk to you then if and when he gets his money. Thank you very much. Keep in touch. Okay. Good night. There you had Anthony Bennett, 70 years old, has a way of telling his story. Not Awight, getting away with murder, uncovering how Stuart Lubbock was killed. And I'm glad we owe this to Graham Rico Boston, one of my listeners who has been helping. He helps with a lot of guests. A lot of good guest suggestions come from Graham. I really appreciate it. He's from the UK up there. And he's into rap and, stuff like that, wrestling. Some things I'm not too into, but that stuff we definitely... usually it's a home run whenever Graham sends me a guest. So I really appreciate that a lot. Let's see. Couple of things he was talking about, about this whole thing about how when the police show up at a celebrity's house, everything's handled differently, and the manager comes, the manager says, "Oh, can you take the temperature for us?" Reminds me of the story of Don Simpson. You might recall Don Simpson was a movie producer, and he produced all those movies like Top Gun, and that other one with Tom Cruise with the racetrack, the races, all those. There was a whole series of them, of these movies. They had the same exact pattern, the same template to the movie. Don Simpson, and I guess this was back in the 80s, and he was one of Heidi Fleiss's clients. Heidi Fleiss, the famous madam, Hollywood madam Heidi Fleiss. And Don Simpson had this reputation of being brutally sadomasochistic to the girls that were sent over to him. Had that reputation. And what happened was one night, Don Simpson had a party. Hollywood producer has a party, right? And it was a death at his party. I believe it was a young man. And same thing as Michael Barrymore and Stuart Lubbock. Before he would call the police, he called up people to help him out. Who did he call up? Anthony Pellicano. Private investigator to the stars, tough guy Anthony Pellicano, now serving time in prison for possession of wiretapping equipment. By the way, he has encrypted wiretapping conversations that no one's been able to unencrypt. No one's able to break the code and see what's on those thousands of hours. Because he had a device where he could sit in his office and dial somebody's phone and remotely record their phone calls. Okay? I didn't like that. Wouldn't you like to have that? You got an ex-girlfriend or something like that you want to check up on? Right? I got a couple of those. Anyway. Also, they found him with some C4 explosives, a hand grenade. He was involved in the threats, wiretapping. He's in prison. So Don Simpson has a problem. Death in his party. Doesn't call the police. Who does he call? He calls Anthony Pellicano. And this is admitted. Anthony Pellicano helped clean up the crime scene. They disposed of drugs and narcotics and, unpleasant items, unmentionables that they did not want prying eyes to see. But what I find even more fascinating than that is who was the first responding officer to that crime scene? Mark Furman. So Anthony Pellicano did not pick up his cell phone. Back in the 80s, they had expensive cell phones. I'm sure Anthony Pellicano had one. And call up 911. He did not dial 911. No, he dialed some other number. Possibly Mark Furman's phone number. His cell phone number. He had a cell phone. He was walking around with one, right? But we know that Anthony Pellicano did not call 911 because there was not a 911 call. And there was not a 911 police dispatch. There were not officers, uniformed officers in their patrol cars arriving at the scenes. First officers to respond. That's you see it in the police reports. You read it. I was the first officer to respond. Officer Kaplan, 54122, first officer on the scene. Right?
No, not in this case. The first officer to respond was a detective in the robbery homicide unit. Okay, shows up after the called by his buddy, and later on by his he was a client of Anthony Pellicano. That came out in the O.J. Simpson trial, that Mark Furman was a client of Anthony Pellicano. So they had a prior relationship. They had some kind of association, and somehow crime scene evidence got covered up, disposed of, and there was no charges filed. And whatever happened with that death is a mystery. Don Simpson, I think, died of natural causes later on. Who knows? Maybe they weren't natural causes. But everything that goes on in Hollywood, who knows exactly what went on down there. Also, too, he was talking about how the medical examiner, that is the choking point. That's the word I was looking for, the choke point. Where if you got corrupt politicians and corrupt people in power, and they're often people, if you got that medical examiner, that pathologist, you got them in your pocket, they can say the cause of death was suicide. Half the game is won. Half the game is won right there. We'll be right back after these messages with more of the Opperman Report. I want to thank our guest, Tony Bennett. I should have learned some Tony Bennett songs. I could have sung. A summer enchanted evening. All right, I'll learn some Tony Bennett. Anyway, I'm not going to even bother. Tony Bennett, not Awight, and that's spelled Awight, not Awight. Getting Away with Murder, uncovering how Stuart Lubbock was killed at Michael Montgomery. It's Michael Montgomery, right?
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. Welcome to our new sponsor. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com. Every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month. $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Sean Duff from strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Hey, don't forget you can go to emailrevealer.com, get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Taping later on with Mike Parziale, a huge favorite on the show. Always get a lot of downloads and YouTube views and iTunes downloads and all that kind of stuff, Spreaker views. When we have Mike Parziale on the show from mjvictims.com. Fascinating guy, a lot of information on the Michael Jackson case, but also, too, the Corey Feldman thing and Scotty Schwartz. He's into all this stuff. He gets really involved, and inserts himself into all this stuff. We're going to be talking about a bunch of topics, Hollywood Pelfit. Just last night, as I'm taping this show, Corey Feldman was attacked by a sharp object. He was sitting in his car, and he says 3 men came up while he was in his car with his bodyguards, but 3 men came up into the car, opened up the door, and started stabbing him with an object. And it's being investigated, according to Corey Feldman, for attempted murder. So I'll be talking to Mike Parziale about that, big favorite of the show. Also, I will be tomorrow, Thursday, I will be live with Wayne Madsen. Wayne Madsen, you might recall the name, well-known alternative media investigative reporter and researcher, has been doing some research and some work into the Trump-Epstein lawsuit, where Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were co-defendants in a lawsuit by Katie Doe, was suing him for rape and being molested when she was 13 years old. And she had a witness, Tiffany Doe, her friend, who she confided to at the time. And they mentioned a third party named Maria, who Trump threatened them. He says, if you don't keep your mouth shut, the same thing that happened to Maria is going to happen to you. So they believe, Wayne Madsen believes that his friend and he has tracked down the real Maria, and they've connected it to a missing Maria in New Jersey, and there's some kind of nefarious activities with the mayor down there. So we're going to have him on the show to explain his research there and see what he's come up with. I'd be very interested to hear that for obvious reasons. Back to our guest today, Anthony Bennett, not Awight, getting away with murder, uncovering how Stuart Lubbock was killed. Stuart Lubbock, of course, claimed to be found drowning in a pool. Reminds me of the Drew Peterson case and how when the police show up and they find a body in a bathtub, right away that they make the assumption that it's a suicide or an accidental drowning in a tub. A slipped, hit your head, fell asleep, you're drinking wine, you fall asleep in a tub, all those kind of things. And they immediately classify it as not a homicide. Drew Peterson, who was a police detective himself, would have experience and knowledge of this kind of thing. Good way to stage a murder scene. Also, too, I believe that one of the Jackson brothers of the Jackson 5 had a wife or an ex-wife that was found drowning in a pool. And I think Jerry Lee Lewis had a couple. Don't quote me on that. But I know there was some famous rock musician, the notorious ones. They called him the killer. He might be the one. Had a couple of ex-wives found drowning in a pool. O.J. Simpson lost a child, too, to a pool drowning. Hardly ever talked about, too. And, also coincidence with this case, too, as well, as O.J. Simpson's father was a female impersonator. A lot of people don't know that. Died of AIDS in San Francisco. Again, another aspect of the O.J. case doesn't get much publicity. I think it's interesting. I put out an urgent plea this week. I hate to talk about this kind of stuff. It's so distressing and humiliating. And then people complain, you're always begging for money. And I really don't. Only when we have emergencies. And I put out a recording on Wednesday morning on the 28th because we have this bill coming up with Spreaker. And if we lose Spreaker, we lose iHeart and iTunes and YouTube. And if you listen to the show on either iHeart or iTunes or YouTube, this may be the last broadcast you hear because we may not be able to keep that up and running without either a new sponsor. We get a nice sponsor who's going to keep us going for another few months, or some donations. If you enjoy the show and you want to donate money, that would be a big help. And you can contact me either way at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And you can go to the Opperman Report website. There's a donate page on there where you could donate to keep us up and running until we get more sponsors and the show grows. We can get bigger guests. You know who I have booked? I'm going to be taping with next week. Danny Bonaducci's ex-wife, Gretchen Bonaducci. And my ex-girlfriend actually went to high school with Danny Bonaducci, so I have some questions that may be a couple of curveballs for him, but we're going to be throwing that out there. I'm looking forward to that, to Gretchen Bonaducci. I think that's a good get, as they say in the business. I think that's just about everything I wanted to cover. So thank you so much, and thank you for listening in today with Anthony Bennett, not Awight.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. Welcome to our new sponsor. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com. Every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank Sean Duff from strawmanmusic.com. He's an excellent musician. And I also want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.